Season 2 of The Mandalorian ended in triumphant fashion, with fan service galore, and just like Season 1, the second batch of Mando episodes offered up a ton of fun Star Wars Easter eggs for fans to find. Here are a few you may have missed. To kick off Chapter 16, The Rescue, the team assembles to retrieve Grogu from the clutches of Moff Gideon. Here's the plan. They'll board the Imperial light cruiser Gideon is keeping Grogu imprisoned on, locate him, potentially liberate the Darksaber, and escape before the Imperial Dark Troopers are activated. Of course, for this to work, they require a vessel capable of deceiving the cruiser's deck crew. Their ship of choice is the Lambda-class Imperial shuttle escorting Dr. Pershing. This particular brand of shuttle has a long history in Star Wars, first appearing in Return of the Jedi as Darth Vader's personal transport. Also in that film, the Endor strike team steals one to use as camouflage to evade Imperial forces on their way to the forest moon's surface. Apparently, this is a perfect ship to use if you want to cause some trouble for the Empire. Near the beginning of Chapter 16, Boba Fett and Mando meet up with Costco Reeves and Bo-Katan Kryze to ask for their help. After some tension and a brief scuffle, Costco warns that if Boba doesn't back off, he'll, quote, be talking through the window of a Bacta tank. That certainly doesn't sound good, but what exactly is a Bacta tank? Its mention in the Season 2 finale is a callback to both The Empire Strikes Back and The Clone Wars, as Bacta tanks appear in both. As their name suggests, Bacta tanks are, well, tanks that hold people who have been gravely injured. The tube-like vessels contain gallons upon gallons of Bacta, a fluid that promotes accelerated healing. In the Star Wars canon, the Republic made use of Bacta tanks to patch up injured fighters, and clone troopers could receive Bacta tank treatment at medical stations. Luke Skywalker himself, who makes a triumphant return via CGI in this episode, got submerged in a Bacta tank at Hoth's Echo Base after his run-in with a Wampa in The Empire Strikes Back. As seen in Rogue One, even Darth Vader knew the benefits of Bacta tanks, as he kept one in his castle for times when he didn't want to be bogged down by the heavy armor he was forced to wear after being sliced up and burnt alive in Revenge of the Sith. Even though Bo-Katan cares to some degree about rescuing Grogu, she makes it clear that she's after one thing and one thing only, the Darksaber. Mando's mission to rescue the young Force user proved the perfect chance for Bo-Katan to get the artifact back, and in turn liberate Mandalore. But her plan couldn't have gone more awry. In his attempt to free Grogu from his holding cell, Mando finds himself locked in a duel against Gideon and his Darksaber. Miraculously, the bounty hunter manages to defeat the Imperial remnant leader with the help of his Beskar spear, making him the new owner of the unconventional lightsaber. According to Mandalorian tradition, as Gideon mentions, the only way to become the rightful owner of the Darksaber is to defeat its current wielder in battle, thus adding to its legend. While it may appear that Moff Gideon simply wanted to create discord among the team, he's actually telling the truth, according to what we've learned about Mandalorian traditions in the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. Therefore, should Bo-Katan weigh her options and value Mandalore's future over her allyship with Mando, despite the fact that he'd rather give it away, it's entirely likely the two will square off down the line. Then again, if he just handed it over, it wouldn't be the first time that's happened. On Rebels, Sabine Wren just gives the Darksaber to Bo-Katan, with the approval of her clan, without so much as a scuffle. In the after-credit stinger, we travel to Tatooine once more, now revisiting the former palace of the villainous gangster Jabba the Hutt that's currently under the control of a recognizable face. It appears that, as a result of his death in Return of the Jedi, Jabba's major domo Bib Fortuna asserted himself as the head of his criminal empire and indulged in the perks that came with it. The throne, the dancers, the works. He's also noticeably gained a few pounds. While he doesn't have a very rich backstory, Bib Fortuna is a classic background alien from the original Star Wars trilogy. He was Jabba's right-hand man for years, even as long ago as the time of the Phantom Menace, where he appeared alongside his employer. Following the destruction of Jabba's sail barge, many assumed the scheming Twi'lek perished with it. But The Mandalorian proved that wasn't the case. Instead, Bib Fortuna met his end at the barrel of Boba Fett's blaster, and the bounty hunter will presumably take over his duties as an underworld kingpin in the Book of Boba Fett, a spin-off arriving on Disney Plus in December 2021. After the first few shots are fired outside Bib's quarters, a body rolls down the stairs. Bib then waves one of his Gamorrean guards forward, instructing him to investigate the disturbance. He's speaking Huttese, the language of Jabba's species, and the episode's subtitles don't provide translation, so it's tough to know everything that Bib told the Gamorrean. However, if you listen closely, you'll hear that what Bib says before the guards run off is McClunky.
McClunky!
Star Wars fans will recall that in the Disney Plus version of A New Hope, Greedo, the bounty hunter who's long been the subject of the who shot first debate involving Han Solo, says a word that sounds exactly like McClunky just before he shoots at Han. Vanity Fair reported in 2019 that this addition was done at the behest of George Lucas himself. McClunky is also the same phrase that the pod racer Sebulba uses when he threatens young Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace. Subtitles for that film reveal that McClunky translates from Huttese to "it will be the end of you." So unlike the mysterious Dankferric, the untranslated expletive of choice in The Mandalorian, we actually know what McClunky means.
Dankferric!
The 7th installment of The Mandalorian 2nd season, Chapter 15, The Believer, was a Grogu free-thrill ride on a new tropical planet. As always, there were plenty of cool Easter eggs tucked away for fans to find. Here are a few you may have missed. Chapter 15 opens on the return of Miggs Mayfeld, the mercenary and former Imperial sharpshooter who double-crossed Mando in Season 1. When we catch up with him this time around, he's now under New Republic custody and working at a scrapyard. Note the old AT-ATs repurposed once again as cranes, just like in Chapter 11. Mayfeld's luck turns around when Marshal Karen Dune arrives to acquire his services and knowledge to Imperial protocols as part of the plan to locate Moff Gideon. Not looking to turn down the chance to redeem himself, he departs the planet with her and Mando's crew, passing by a familiar background alien on his way out. Before he meets with Dune, Mayfeld walks past a wolf-like being known as a Hassk, which is a fairly new breed to the Star Wars franchise, first appearing on screen in 2015's The Force Awakens. We know from books and other media that their culture is limited in regards to their technology, but once they figured out space travel, many chose to take on odd jobs across the galaxy to help satiate their desire for chaos. And fans of Star Wars Resistance know that a good number of Hassk joined the ranks of Quarren pirate Krayjin Gore during the New Republic era. Now aboard Boba Fett's ship Slave 1, Mayfeld is briefed on the situation concerning Grogu's abduction and Mando's plan to get him back. The only issue is, for the ex-Imperial to gain access to Moff Gideon's coordinates, he needs to use an internal Imperial terminal. Thus, he points the crew in the direction of the planet Morak to find one. However, this won't be an easy task, as a good portion of the Empire's remaining forces occupies and mines the planet for a volatile fuel known as rhydonium, which has a long history in the Star Wars universe. First appearing in the Clone Wars episode Missing in Action, rhydonium is depicted as an incredibly dangerous and highly explosive chemical. As a result, it's frequently used as a weapon of war, just as often as it powers military-grade transports. Since its debut, rhydonium has made its presence felt all over Star Wars media, from Rebels to the Poe Dameron-centric comic book series, and as The Mandalorian proved, when it does make the odd appearance, it's best to look for cover as soon as possible. While scoping out a way to infiltrate the Empire's base on Morak, Mando and his group determine that the easiest way to sneak behind enemy lines is for two of them to take over an Imperial fuel transport, and then disguise themselves as the drivers. Initially, Cara Dune is more than prepared to join Mayfeld for this phase of their plan, but he explains to her that she can't do so, since the installation has the technology to detect the genetic code of those on New Republic records. Also, he name-drops a subdivision of the Imperial war machine that appears to have dissolved with it. The Imperial Security Bureau, or ISB as Mayfeld refers to it, was a branch of the Imperial Intelligence Network that specialized in law enforcement during the Empire's heyday. Fans of Rebels should instantly recognize the acronym, as Kallus made a name for himself as an ISB officer before defecting to the Rebel cause. And those familiar with Clone Wars know that former Republic Navy Admiral Wolf Yularen, who also appeared very briefly in A New Hope, became the commissioner of the ISB shortly after the Empire situated itself as the galaxy's new governmental system. As Mando and his team arrive on Morak, they quickly realize that getting to the Imperial terminal will be anything but easy. The planet is crawling with Imperial loyalists and plenty of pirates looking to interrupt their operation by any means necessary. But still, they go ahead with their plan to infiltrate the local installation. Of course, the Empire didn't just send run-of-the-mill stormtroopers to guard the mine and fuel refineries, and instead diversified their ranks with some other recognizable trooper classes from different eras of the Star Wars universe. First and foremost, the design of the rhydonium transport team's armor is reminiscent of Imperial hover tank pilots from 2016's Rogue One. Digging deeper into the spin-off film's plethora of trooper designs, you'll notice that they also encounter a large number of Imperial shore troopers, not unlike the ones present during the Battle of Scarif. Additionally, Kara and Fennec Shan's sniping put a New Hope-style Death Star gunners in their crosshairs, driving the point home that the backbone of this galaxy-wide regime isn't as disjointed as many believe. Having successfully infiltrated the Imperial base with only a mild amount of trouble from the locals, Mando and Mayfeld keep their eyes peeled for the terminal and find it rather swiftly. However, they run into Mayfeld's former commanding officer, Valin Hess, who commends them for their successful delivery of the rhydonium, not realizing their true intentions. In an apparent nod to the 1999 comedy Office Space, Mayfeld and Mando attempt to elude Hess with an excuse about filling out TPS reports, but it doesn't work.
You apparently didn't put one of the new cover sheets on your TPS reports?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that. I forgot.
Mayfeld also fibs and claims that Mando is hard of hearing following an incident on Tanab. Tanab is first mentioned on screen in Return of the Jedi when Lando explains to Han that a maneuver he pulled off during a battle on the planet got him promoted to general. Valin Hess invites Mando and Mayfeld to join him for a drink and some reminiscing over the Empire's finest moments, including the short-lived Operation Cinder, made famous by the 2017 Star Wars Battlefront 2 video game. After the death of Emperor Palpatine and the destruction of the second Death Star, Imperial Sentinels directed the remaining forces to begin carrying out a plan known as the Contingency. One aspect of it, dubbed Operation Cinder, was devised by the Sith Lord personally. It effectively destroyed planets across the galaxy that were once under Imperial control. Large climate-disrupting satellites placed above specific Imperial worlds annihilated their ecology and residents, ensuring that the Empire and its enemies didn't continue in the event of Palpatine's death. It's a pretty twisted concept, but it's fairly on brand for a regime bred from the dark side. The 6th episode of The Mandalorian's 2nd season, Chapter 14, The Tragedy, was an action-packed installment sure to please Boba Fett fans, and as always, there were plenty of Easter eggs tucked away in the margins. Teased at the beginning of The Mandalorian's 2nd season, Chapter 14 finally brought Boba Fett back to the forefront of the Star Wars universe in grand fashion. He not only reclaimed his armor, but also took the fight to a platoon of hapless stormtroopers, reminding everyone why he's considered the most ruthless bounty hunter in the galaxy. Still, while this wasn't an especially big return for Boba Fett, one couldn't help but notice how the memory of his father, Jango Fett, dominated much of his screen time. This is evident first when Mando questions him on his Mandalorian heritage. Boba Fett replies, "I'm a simple man, making his way through the galaxy, like my father before me." Fans of Attack of the Clones know that this is reminiscent of a conversation that Jango had with Obi-Wan, where he said, "I'm just a simple man, trying to make my way in the universe." Additionally, Boba mentions that, much like his ship, Slave One, his famed armor set is a hand-me-down, once belonging to his father. Fett also explains to Mando that, contrary to popular belief, Jango didn't steal it. Rather, he earned it years ago during his days as a foundling. Boba says his father Jango even served during the Mandalorian Civil Wars, an event alluded to now and again in the Clone Wars animated series. The conflict was a reason for the divide between Satine Kryze of Mandalore and Governor Pre Vizsla of Concordia. After Mando recovers his Beskar spear, Boba Fett says he wants Mando to take a look at something, then presses a spot on his armor just above his wrist. A sequence of text written in the Mandalorian language flashes into the air. Boba explains that's his chain code, which has been encoded into the armor for 25 years. The audio description on Disney Plus calls it a lineage tree. As Boba points out, the code mentions both him and his father. But what about the other lines? Star Wars fans online made quick work of translating the chain code into English. It's incomplete, but some of it makes sense. From left to right, it reads, Foundling, took into the year the Concord Dawn, mentor Jast, father Fett Boba Fett. But what does all that mean? First mentioned in the Clone Wars and first appearing in Rebels, Concord Dawn is an Outer Rim Territories planet. Led by Fen Rao, Mandalorian protectors ruled Concord Dawn in the Age of the Empire. On Concord Dawn, the Empire crossed paths with Rao and fellow Mandalorian warrior Sabine Wren, who gave the Darksaber to Bo-Katan before it somehow ended up in Moff Gideon's hands. Additionally, Concord Dawn was the home planet of Rako Hardeen. a bounty hunter known as the Marksman of Concord Dawn, who once tried to assassinate Obi-Wan in an episode of The Clone Wars. Concord Dawn is also allegedly where Jango Fett himself was born, according to the canon reference book Star Wars: The Complete Visual Dictionary, New Edition. The mentor Jas part of the lineage tree is likely a reference to Jaster Muriel, a Mandalorian warrior also born on Concord Dawn, and an important figure to the Fett family in Legends canon. Muriel first appeared in the comic Jango Fett Open Seasons in 2002. Initially serving as a journeyman protector, a low-level cop essentially, Muriel wound up killing a corrupt high-ranking officer, driven by his unshakable morals. For this, he was exiled from Concord Dawn, and eventually joined the Mandalorians. Muriel later rose in the ranks to become the sole leader of the Mandalorian people. He established the Mandalorian Honor Code, resulting in tension from the new Mandalorian group and the Death Watch splinter terrorist group, led by the vicious Tor Vizsla. When war erupted, Muriel headed back to Concord Dawn, where he saved an orphaned Jango Fett from a Death Watch attack. Muriel became Jango's adoptive father and mentor, but was killed 6 years later by Vizsla. Jango later avenged Muriel's death, then rose to become the new leader of the Mandalorian people. There were a few minor Easter eggs hidden in Chapter 14 worth mentioning. Boba Fett says that the appearance of Moff Gideon's light cruiser isn't a spice dream, a reference to spice, the most popular illicit substance in the Star Wars universe. First mentioned way back in A New Hope, the drug is a staple in Star Wars stories, and a pivotal part of Solo was even set in a spice mine. Blue butterfly-like insects similar to the one flying near Grogu appeared on Endor in the Battlefront video game series, and a slightly different blue species appeared in the Clone Wars. The E-Web heavy repeating blaster used by the stormtroopers in this episode before it was crushed by a Raiders of the Lost Ark-style runaway boulder first appeared in The Empire Strikes Back at the Battle of Hoth. And finally, while Dark Troopers first appeared in the 1995 game Star Wars Dark Forces, their design is depicted in The Mandalorian sure called to mind Tony Stark's Iron Man armor, especially while in flight. This makes sense, of course, considering Iron Man director and Happy Hogan portrayer Jon Favreau is the showrunner for The Mandalorian. The 5th episode of The Mandalorian 2nd season revealed that Baby Yoda is really Baby Grogu, and introduced in live action one of Star Wars' most fearsome Jedi warriors. The episode also featured some fun Easter eggs for fans to find. Shortly after the impressive live-action debut of Ahsoka Tano, Chapter 13 jumps to Mando and Grogu arriving on Corvus to meet with the Togruta Force user about potentially teaching the little one. They promptly land and make their way to a nearby settlement, where they are welcomed by barren, grungy streets with sparse inhabitants. Among them is an 8D series smelter droid, first introduced in the original Star Wars trilogy. The most notable of this run of droid went by the moniker 8D8, and appeared on the big screen for the first and only time in Return of the Jedi. It didn't hold the spotlight for very long, as its biggest claim to fame is being the one responsible for torturing a gonk droid at Jabba's palace. Over the years, however, this brand of droid has become a frequent background presence across other forms of Star Wars media, including the animated series The Clone Wars and the Galaxy's Edge novels. Mando is barely in town 5 minutes before the magistrate summons him to speak with her. She gets right to the point, offering Mando a spear made out of pure Beskar if he kills Ahsoka. While he doesn't necessarily accept the job formally, he does secure from his wannabe employer a set of coordinates to find the Jedi. He and his foundlings set off into the mangled wilderness, but little do they know something is watching them. High above their heads, resting on a tree branch, sits an owl-like creature known as a convor. Rebels and Clone Wars fans surely recognize the significance of these birds, as they're prevalent throughout Ahsoka's journey in the Star Wars canon and represent the purity of the light side of the Force. Dave Filoni, who wrote and directed Chapter 13, has gone on record saying that these creatures are also observers and protectors, and the one present in The Mandalorian just before Ahsoka arrives to defend herself against Mando fits that description perfectly. Ahsoka and Mando eventually come to an agreement that benefits them both. If he helps her displace the magistrate and free her settlement, she'll take Grogu under her wing and hone his Force powers. According to Mando, the magistrate is always flanked by 2 HK-87 assassin droids, which fans of the Star Wars The Old Republic MMO will surely recognize as bad news. Hunter-killer droids first arrived via the 2003 Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic video game. and were characterized as highly efficient assassins known and feared for their stealth. Various models took center stage depending on the story, the most notable being Darth Revan's personally constructed HK-47. Others appeared all over Old Republic-era media until it was stricken from the universe back in 2012, following Disney's purchase of the Star Wars IP. Their unsuccessful attempt to stop Mando and Ahsoka also marks their first live-action appearance in the franchise. Once the Jedi and the Mandalorian make it back to the village, they get started right away and infiltrate its thick walls. And in true Star Wars fashion, a massive firefight ensues from there. Severely outnumbered, Ahsoka has no choice but to utilize a stealth approach to take down her enemies. At one point in the fight, she begins traversing the back alleys in an effort to box her opponents in, leading them to carefully sweep the area and apparently frustrating the local Tooka population. This lovable yet dangerous feline has become a staple of Star Wars media over the past few years, dating back to their earliest appearances on the Clone Wars. The most well-known subspecies of Tooka is the Lothcat, a frequent face in Rebels and a handful of Dr. Aphra comics, as well as in other various books and shows.
Well, we've been out here for hours, and all I've seen are these stinking Lothcats.
Additionally, this isn't their debut on The Mandalorian either, as one variety of Tooka popped up in the Season 1 episode Sanctuary, scaring Grogu. Unsurprisingly, the Magistrate can't hold her own for very long against Ahsoka Tano, and ultimately loses their duel. The Jedi knocks the spear from her opponent's hands, holding a lightsaber up to her neck as a form of intimidation, hoping to get the information out of her that she desires. She demands her foe to reveal the location of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Non-Rebels viewers might be a bit lost here, but for those who spent plenty of time with the Ghost Crew right up until the series finale, this is exactly the question they've waited years to find out the answer to. A holdover from the non-canon Star Wars Expanded Universe, Grand Admiral Thrawn burst on the Rebels scene at the beginning of Season 3. During the liberation of Lothal at the end of Season 4, Thrawn and Ezra Bridger were shot into hyperspace by a group of Purrgil, and haven't appeared in any Star Wars media since. Ahsoka and Sabine Wren set out to find them shortly after, but as evidenced by the Mandalorian's reveal, the search goes on. At the end of Chapter 13, Ahsoka doesn't necessarily hold up her end of the deal, once again refusing to train Grogu. But she does give Mando a push in the right direction. Just before he and his foundling board the Razor Crest for their next adventure, she advises that they set out for the planet Tython, where the ruins of an ancient Jedi temple reside. There, Grogu can sit on a seeing stone and decide between letting his Force abilities go or continuing his long dormant training. He might even be able to connect with one of the few Jedi left roaming the stars. Tython is not well known to the Star Wars universe, featured only in a novel, a few comics, and a game before its small screen debut on The Mandalorian. But its importance to the overall history of the galaxy is immense. Located in the deep core and shrouded in mystery, Tython is one of the planets considered the birthplace of the Jedi religion. In fact, it serves prominently as the starting realm for the Jedi in the MMORPG Star Wars: The Old Republic. Episode 4 of The Mandalorian's second season, Chapter 12, The Siege, is once again stuffed with fun Easter eggs for fans to find. In the opening moments of the siege, Mando and the child make way for Navarro, so that the Razor Crest can receive some much-needed repairs before the big trip to Corvus. Navarro has undergone some serious changes since the last time Mando was here, but the seedier criminal elements that get Navarro his reputation remain festering in the shadows. One such example is the small band of Aqualicious thieves who took up residence in the armorer's former forge. Navarro's new marshal, Cara Dune, makes quick work of the Aqualicious, a recurring species in the Star Wars universe familiar to fans of A New Hope especially. One particularly short-tempered Aqualicious named Ponda Baba famously tried to pick a fight with Luke Skywalker in the Mos Eisley Cantina, before Obi-Wan intervened. Greef Karga and Cara Dune insist that Mando leaves the child at the newly established school on Navarro, but not before passing a statue of IG-11, the assassin droid who sacrificed itself for our heroes in Season 1. At the school, which was a cantina when we last saw it in the Season 1 finale,
I'm surprised to see this place is still standing.
The child gets the chance to learn about the current geographic makeup of the galaxy. Or he would at least if he wasn't fixated on those macaron-like turquoise cookies. At any rate, during the lesson, the protocol droid instructor name-drops some relevant locations in the Star Wars universe. The most notable detail the droid teacher touches on is that the New Republic capital has shifted from the iconic locale of Coruscant to Sandrila, the birthplace of Mon Mothma and Ben Solo, aka Kylo Ren. In the same lesson, the droid also points to an important area of the galaxy called the Akadezi Maelstrom, which hosted one of Solo: A Star Wars Story's most intense sequences. This dangerous region houses the Maw Cluster, the home of the beast that nearly swallows the Millennium Falcon whole during Han Solo and his crew's perilous attempt to make the famed Kessel Run. They of course make it in less than 12 parsecs, as long as you round down. Speaking of Solo, the red-skinned alien who plans to track her on the Razor Crest is a Mimbanese, a species first introduced in the standalone prequel flick. With the child presumably safe at school and the Razor Crest in for a tune-up, Greef, Mando, and Cara head back to Greef's office to talk business. The moment they walk in the door, they're greeted by Mythrol, who now lives a life of servitude to make up for getting on Greef's bad side. This is the same character Mando took the bounty on and froze in carbonite in the Mandalorian's premiere episode. Despite having thawed some time ago, Mythrol complains of a very familiar side effect that comes with prolonged carbon freezing. Greef makes sure to let Mythrol know that he has no qualms about sticking him back on ice should he not follow his directions, to which the blue alien remarks that he'd prefer not to and that he still can't see out of his left eye. This refers back to Return of the Jedi, in which Han Solo's release from carbonite established the existence of hibernation sickness, an ailment that presents itself as temporary blindness depending on the length of one's imprisonment. The team wastes little time departing Navarro for the outlying Imperial base. On the installation's upper level, Cara, Mando, and Greef assess their situation and review the plan, while Mythrol stands in awe at what will become their one-way ticket off the sabotaged base. A Trexler Marauder. This vehicle, which appears to be a variation of an Imperial troop transport, has popped up in a few Star Wars projects lately, including Star Wars Rebels. But it took over 4 decades to get the vehicle in live action. This particular people mover's roots go way back to the toy stores of 1978, where the Imperial troop transport arrived as a part of Kenner's Star Wars action figure line. So Mythrol's excitement at finding a quote mint Trexler Marauder is likely a nod to the vehicle's toy store origins. Surprisingly, the mission to rid Navarro of Imperial presence goes off without a hitch. The crew manages to make a fairly clean getaway, but not before they uncover a disturbing secret about why the Empire is so interested in the child. By the looks of things, the Imperial remnant is going all in trying to perfect a way to clone a Force-sensitive being. A hologram message from Dr. Pershing explains the Empire's dire need for the child's blood if they're to keep this mysterious program going. He also mentions the child's M count, likely referring to the amount of midichlorians in his body that contribute to his proficiency in the Force. Midichlorians have remained one of the most controversial parts of the Star Wars universe since their debut in The Phantom Menace, and fans haven't heard them discussed in the franchise for quite some time. So what does this all mean? This fledgling Imperial cloning program could connect to the miraculously alive Emperor Palpatine and his tanks full of Snoke clones. The Rise of Skywalker established that Palpatine spent years biding his time on Exegol, in rapidly decaying bodies, attempting to find the path to immortality through cloning. The remnant members of his empire could have been hard at work trying to create a new, more powerful form for their leader during the events of The Mandalorian. Considering how strong Yoda and the child species is in the Force and the length of their natural lifespan, there's no better candidate for a Sith Lord who's trying to rule the galaxy for all time with absolute power. But there's also another possibility. At the very end of the siege, Moff Gideon admires a whole room full of large black stormtrooper-like figures. What are those supposed to be? The audio description on Disney Plus has the answer, calling them immobilized Dark Troopers. Dark Troopers first popped up in the 1995 first-person shooter game Star Wars Dark Forces, where it's implied that they're droids. And the word immobilized does suggest that Gideon and his technician are tending to a fleet of powered-down bots. But Dark Troopers have also been described as cyborgs in other Star Wars media, meaning Gideon could be preparing exosuits for future Force-sensitive clone bodies to occupy. Dark Troopers also appear in the Dark Empire series of comics as elite stormtroopers who have received Force training, so this could also be the destiny Gideon has in mind for the clones. After all, if they're just droids, why wouldn't Gideon have already deployed them? Perhaps he's waiting for a batch of powerful Force users to bring the suits to life, and that's the whole point of Dr. Pershing's mysterious cloning project. Whatever they turn out to be, they're probably bad news. Mando had better be ready. The third episode of The Mandalorian's second season, Chapter 11, The Heiress, was a seafaring and stormtrooper zapping good time, with a fair amount of Easter eggs and callbacks tucked away for fans to find. The Heiress brought Mando and his little green friend to the never-before-seen watery moon of Trask. completing their mission to deliver Frog Lady and her eggs back to her husband, credited here as Frogman. After a very bumpy landing and an assist from a crane machine that might just be a repurposed Imperial walker, we get a closer look at the residents of Trask. Both the Quarren and the Mon Calamari species join the Star Wars universe in Return of the Jedi, although they appeared in very different places. The Quarren hung out with Jabba the Hutt, while the film introduced the Mon Calamari as key members of the rebellion during the Battle of Endor. The most famous among them is the legendary Admiral Ackbar, who remained a part of the faction until he died in The Last Jedi. Additionally, a Season 4 arc of the Clone Wars put their conflict on their homeworld of Mon Calal front and center. Plus, Rogue One also bolstered the Mon Calamari standing in the rebellion ranks, with the introduction of Admiral Raddus. For both species, the heiress isn't their first appearance in The Mandalorian. In the opening scene of the series premiere, a Quarren was seen being sliced in half by a door. Greef Karga also offered Mando a Mon Calamari bounty in Episode 3. Plus, in the heiress, Mando finally uses the Mon Calamari money Karga gave him way back in the very first episode. After chartering a ship to go find more Mandalorians, Mando and the child are betrayed by their Quarren Sea captain. Thankfully, they're rescued in short order from a new creature known as a Momokor by a group of blue and grey-clad Mandalorians. We know from the Clone Wars that these are the Night Owls, led by fan favorite Bo-Katan Kryze. Bo-Katan is played by Battlestar Galactica's Katie Sackhoff for the first time in live action, and she's the heiress from the title, a nod to her past as the ruler of Mandalore. Bo-Katan arrived in the Star Wars universe during the 4th season of the Clone Wars, with Sackhoff also voicing her as Death Watch leader Pre Vizsla's right-hand woman. Pre Vizsla, by the way, was voiced by Mandalorian showrunner Jon Favreau. We know from the Season 1 finale of The Mandalorian that Mando was rescued by Death Watch members as a child. With Pre Vizsla's later demise at the hands of Darth Maul, Bo-Katan and a group of Mandalorians split off from the faction and formed the Mandalore Resistance, playing an integral role in the Siege of Mandalore during the Clone Wars Season 7. Following the fall of the Galactic Empire, Bo-Katan's exploits were shrouded in relative mystery, as her story drops off after a brief appearance in Rebels. However, it appears that The Mandalorian will rectify that, finally giving audiences the answers they desire about her whereabouts and motives in a post-Imperial world. In The Mandalorian Season 1 finale, Moff Gideon used an ancient Mandalorian Darksaber to cut through the wreckage of his downed TIE fighter to escape. Since that moment, viewers have wondered how exactly this top-ranking Imperial officer wound up with the artifact. Before its re-emergence, however, Bo-Katan was the last person shown wielding it in Star Wars Rebels, after fellow Mandalorian Sabine Wren handed it over to her. Any specifics detailing how she lost it, however, have yet to come to light.
There is something I need if I am to rule Mandalore, something that was once mine.
The heiress went a long way in solving this mystery through a bit of key dialogue from Bo-Katan that hints to a previously untold Star Wars story. After she and her crew fight their way to the bridge of an Imperial shuttle, Bo-Katan interrogates the head officer, played by Titus Welliver, the third actor from HBO's Deadwood to appear this season, following Timothy Oliphant and W.L. Brown. Bo-Katan doesn't get any information out of him before he takes his own life, but she does allude to some kind of shared history between herself and Gideon, asking the officer to take her to him without actually naming him. Hopefully, the show will expand more on how the weapon slipped from her hands into Gideon's at some point after her Rebels cameo. After successfully hijacking an Imperial Gozanti cruiser ship, a model first spotted in The Phantom Menace, Mando departs to continue his mission of delivering the child to its people, but not before asking his fellow Mandalorian where he can find the Jedi she claimed to know. Grateful for his aid, Bo-Katan tells him to travel to the city of Caladan, to the forest planet of Corvus, a new location for the Star Wars universe. So who is this Jedi on Corvus? Another animated favorite, Ahsoka Tano. The debut of Anakin Skywalker's former Padawan in live action has been a long time coming, with speculation over Rosario Dawson's casting as Ahsoka running rampant for months, and the circumstances surrounding her imminent arrival couldn't be more satisfying for die-hard Star Wars fans.
You should have seen him in person. Anakin Skywalker. He was my master.
Having initially squared off as enemies, Bo-Katan and Ahsoka allied during the Siege of Mandalore, as detailed on Clone Wars' 7th season. Once the Jedi disbanded and Order 66 went into full effect, leading Ahsoka to go into hiding, the status of their coalition grew murky, but it seems that they retained some method of contact throughout the Galactic Civil War and in the midst of the Empire's collapse. Also, much like Bo-Katan, Ahsoka's adventures continued through Rebels, where she took up the codename Fulcrum and became a secret rebel operative. Episode 2 of the second season of the Disney Plus hit The Mandalorian was as eccentric as anything in the Star Wars universe, and that includes plenty of tasty hidden Easter eggs for fans to spot. After returning from the successful crate dragon hunt, the Mandalorian returns to Mos Eisley in Chapter 10 The Passenger to meet with Peli Motto. He reports back and lets her know that the supposed Mandalorian frequenting Mos Pelgo was just a man in Mandalorian armor. But she reassures him that she can put him in contact with someone who can lead him to his people. First, she introduces him to Dr. Mandible, a giant bug-like creature whose brief screen time carries with it a couple of meanings. Mandible appears to be a member of the Killik species, first introduced in the Dark Nest trilogy of books by Troy Denning. A Killik that may or may not be Dr. Mandible also appeared in Episode 5 of Season 1 of The Mandalorian, sitting at the Cantina bar. It's also worth noting that filmmaker Peyton Reed, best known for the Ant-Man movies, directed The Passenger. Thus, the inclusion of this Ant-inspired character seems a not-so-subtle nod to the director's Marvel Cinematic Universe contributions. When Mando first gets back to Mos Eisley after a long, strenuous walk across the desert, his first stop is at the Cantina, where he finds Motto in the middle of a high-stakes card game against Dr. Mandible. This scene doesn't last long, and their game isn't the focus by any means, but the cards in Motto's hands point to one of the Star Wars universe's favorite pastimes, a good old-fashioned game of sabacc. Sabacc is a staple of Star Wars, appearing in everything from books, TV shows, video games, and obviously a few of the movies. It's mentioned now and again throughout the Skywalker saga, even popping up in the background of The Force Awakens, but its most notable appearance came in 2018's Solo, A Star Wars Story. In the film, a young Lando Calrissian cheats a young Han Solo out of a game, but the smuggler later gets his future ally back by using his techniques against him to steal a win, walking away with the Millennium Falcon. Turning back to The Mandalorian, here's a neat detail. Motto's unbeatable winning hand in The Passenger is known as an Idiot's Array. And it's the same winning hand Lando had in a Star Wars Rebels episode of the same name.
Not so fast. It appears I have an idiot's array.
Just before departing for Trask, Mando and the child wait inside Peli Motto's hangar for their passenger to arrive. As a token of their appreciation, they leave her with a portion of the crate dragon meat they secured in the previous episode, which she cooks up rather peculiarly. A Treadwell droid holds up the cut of meat to the flames of a stationary pod racer engine to roast it, a reference to a real-life Star Wars eatery located at Disney's Galaxy's Edge theme park. The restaurant in question is Ronto Roasters, a neat little place with a menu including something for everyone. While Ronto Roasters doesn't have any crate dragon steaks for sale, one of its more decorative elements draws a neat parallel to this Mandalorian scene. At the heart of the diner, you can watch droids cook food beneath a pod racer engine in the same fashion as Motto's droid. Even though it's all for show at the amusement park, it's nice to see this method of food preparation make its way into Star Wars canon proper. Mando and the child's journey with their passenger, the Frog Lady, and her containers of eggs becomes a bit complicated since they can't utilize hyperspace travel for the sake of her unborn children. Instead, they have to make the journey to the planet Trask at sublight, meaning that anyone looking for Mando will have a much easier time finding him. That includes the New Republic's X-Wing patrols, who press the bounty hunter relentlessly for information about his ship and his shady dealings.
I need you to send us a ping. We're out here sweeping for Imperial holdouts.
One pilot in particular likely stood out to seasoned Star Wars fans from the moment he arrived on screen. The mastermind behind both the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and an occasional Mandalorian director, Dave Filoni, makes a brief appearance in The Passenger, in a reprisal of his Season 1 role as Trapper Wolf. The character made his franchise debut in Chapter 6, The Prisoner, in which he, alongside fellow directors Deborah Chow and Rick Famuyiwa, destroy Ranzar Malk's space hangar following the escape of New Republic prisoner Quinn. Following their crash landing in the Razor Crest, the Mandalorian, the child, and the Frog Lady are left to survive in the bitter cold of an unnamed ice planet. Fed up with Mando's sluggishness in repairing the ship, the Frog Lady wanders off into the snowy labyrinth and finds a hot spring for herself and her eggs. Concerned for their safety, Mando tries to get the Frog Lady and her precious cargo out of the cave. And his hunch is right. In a scene akin to something from Ridley Scott's Alien or John Carpenter's The Thing, the child unintentionally awakens a den of spider-like creatures known as the Krykna. The Krykna have a long, storied history in the Star Wars universe. first realized in legendary concept artist Ralph McQuarrie's The Empire Strikes Back sketches and initially known as knobby white spiders. While they never appeared in that film, the Krykna eventually made their spine-tingling entrance during Star Wars Rebels' second season, in the episode The Mystery of Chopper Base. They later appeared in a handful of other installments of the series, but their introduction on The Mandalorian is their first in live action. And for those with arachnophobia, hopefully they'll last. In a similar fashion to the initial batch of Mandalorian episodes, Season 2 appears equally as plentiful in the Easter egg department. Right off the bat, the season premiere kicks off Din Djarin's journey to find the remaining Mandalorians hidden across the galaxy. He hopes that they can help him relocate the child, aka Baby Yoda, to wherever he came from, and by extension, lead him to his family as well. However, this won't be a one-and-done task, as the Mandalorian sects are notoriously difficult to locate, meaning the titular bounty hunter has to ask around to locate his people. The first stop for Mando is to meet up with an Absin, a callback to a Cantina alien from 1977's A New Hope, named Gor Koresh on a seedy, unnamed planet. There, the two converse during some type of combat sport involving two Gamorreans, squaring off with vibro axes inside something resembling a boxing ring. These pig-faced aliens made their Star Wars debut in 1983's Return of the Jedi, posing as guards for the gangster Jabba the Hutt. With the underworld kingpin long gone from the time of The Mandalorian, it appears his former palace rogues are doing their best to make ends meet. Along them were a handful of Weequay, which just so happens to be the same race as Mopelgo's resident bartender, who just so happens to be played by W.L. Brown, who played the bartender Dan Doherty on HBO's Deadwood, opposite Timothy Oliphant, who happens to play Marshal Cobb Vanth in this episode of The Mandalorian. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. After concluding his less than cordial meeting with Koresh, Mando and his foundling make their way to Tatooine to look for the supposed Mandalorian wandering the planet's sandy dunes. Of course, they can't get a good look around the planet from the Razor Crest, so they enlist the hangar of Peli Motto, who first appeared on The Mandalorian's inaugural season alongside her crew of pit droids. But they're not the only droids running amok, as a familiar face pops up to help Mando navigate Tatooine's perilous terrain. Motto stored the map of Tatooine inside an R5 astromech unit that fans of A New Hope likely recognize immediately. In A New Hope, Luke Skywalker goes off to purchase from the Jawas a new droid for the family moisture farm, and the red and white R5-D4 was his first choice. Sadly, the little guy didn't get to go off and have galaxy-wide adventures with the future Jedi, thanks to a bad motivator. So that spot went to the fan favorite R2-D2. It's good to see that Motto could fix him up, even if he's a bit sluggish for her liking.
Now take your time, seriously. You just can't get good help anymore.
The vast majority of Season 2's first episode takes place on Tatooine, which is one of the most important locations in the Star Wars universe. Koresh's lead sends Mando to the off-the-grid town of Mos Pelgo, but bookworms would recognize it by another name, Freetown. Chuck Wendig's 2015 novel Aftermath introduced the village, describing it as a dirty, sparsely populated settlement that wasn't for the faint of heart. The Mandalorian Season 2 premiere, however, marks the first appearance of the rundown community in any visual medium. Additionally, during a discussion with the Mandalorian about Mos Pelgo, Peli Motto name-drops some other recognizable Tatooine locales. First and foremost, she mentions Mos Eisley, a wretched hive of scum and villainy that housed Chow Mum's Katina and played a pivotal role in both A New Hope and The Mandalorian Season 1. Mos Espa, the home of Watto's junkyard and the birthplace of Anakin Skywalker, received a nod too, thus rounding out Tatooine's few major settlements. Upon arriving at the largely unremarkable Mos Pelgo, Mando enters the local cantina to speak with anyone who can provide him with information on the town's supposed Mandalorian resident. For Mando, the result was pretty disappointing. He didn't find one of his people, but rather Cobb Vanth, who was simply wearing the armor with no ties to the creed. It doesn't take a deep knowledge of Star Wars to recognize the gear as Boba Fett, although if you only watch the movies and TV shows, you'll have to do some digging to learn about Cobb Vanth. Vanth made his debut in the Star Wars universe in the aforementioned Aftermath novel. The book details his journey pretty vaguely, running over the broad strokes of him receiving the armor from the Jawas and subsequently saving Freetown from marauders and Tusken Raiders, thus earning the moniker the Marshal, which is why the Season 2 premiere bears that name. The Mandalorian certainly picks up the slack, putting Vanth front and center with a series of flashbacks to supply a bit more detail than the book could pull off. Committed as ever to his beliefs, Mando refuses to allow Vanth to keep the Mandalorian armor, since it technically doesn't belong to him. Since both of them are rational men, they come to an agreement that will service both parties. Mando can have every last piece of armor so long as he helps Vanth take down once and for all the carnivorous beast known as the Krayt Dragon that's ravaged Mos Pelgo for years. They might not realize what they're dealing with, but longtime Star Wars fans instantly recognize the danger the two were in. Krayt Dragons are as old as Star Wars itself, first appearing in the background of A New Hope. After C-3PO and R2-D2 crash land in the middle of the Dune Sea, a Krayt Dragon skeleton sits in the sand way off in the distance. Obi-Wan Kenobi later even mimics what many fans assume to be a Krayt Dragon's howl to scare away some Tusken Raiders. Despite holding a constant, menacing presence across all forms of Star Wars media, Krayt Dragons, live ones anyway, are an incredibly rare sight throughout the canon. Most of the time, the story relegates them to a fleeting mention or a set piece used to fill in space, even though they're massive beasts with highly valuable pearls in their bellies. In some non-canonical Star Wars media, it's said these pearls can even be used to craft lightsabers. After making their agreement, Cobb Vanth and the Mandalorian make their way across the Dune Sea in pursuit of the Krayt Dragon. Such a long stretch of sand and scorching heat is impossible to trek on foot, so the two found alternative transportation to reach their destination. Mando rides off on the same speeder bike he borrowed from Peli Motto, but Vanth pulls up in something quite out of the ordinary. His makeshift vehicle sported two large flaps on the front, covering a turbine set below them, with a seating area attached to the rear. This hodgepodge of components calls back to the Phantom Menace's pod racers, sporting a similar look to young Anakin's model. There's no way to confirm if it came from his specifically, but the pieces undeniably came from someone's pod racer, which is a neat nod to the prequels. With the Krayt Dragon defeated, Cobb Vanth keeps his word and returns a Mandalorian armor set to Din Djarin. The episode concludes with the two parting ways as allies, and the Beskar-clad bounty hunter rides off into the sunset with the child at his side, per usual. The episode's story looked complete there, but there was one last surprise left for the fans. By far the biggest Easter egg of the Mandalorian Season 2 debut came in the form of the most fearsome bounty hunter to ever live. The legendary Boba Fett, of course, played by Timwara Morrison, who also played Boba's clone father, Jango, in two of the prequels. From the moment of the Mandalorian's conception, audiences have clamored for Fett to make his big comeback on the show at some capacity. After all, he and the series' main character are incredibly similar visually, and they're in the same profession, so a crossover felt like a given. The previous season didn't do much to satiate this subset of fans, but thankfully for them, Season 2 is going all in. Now, at long last, Jango Fett's clone son is once again making his way to the forefront of the Star Wars universe, and by the looks of things, he's in no mood to make friends. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more Looper videos about the Mandalorian are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.